The massive display screen in the Proxima Systems monitoring station flashed red as an unknown ship emerged from hyperspace. The blue-skinned Astrian operators jumped from their seats, their large eyes widening with fear. They had never seen a vessel of this size before. "Alert Admiral Gray immediately," the lead operator called out, his voice shaking. The ship's energy signature was off the charts, and its design was unlike anything in their database. The station's AI systems quickly calculated its mass. It was at least 3 times larger than the biggest Astrian battleship. Aboard the human warship TES Thunderchild, Captain James Miller stood calmly on the bridge, watching the alien station grow larger in their main viewport. The mission was supposed to be simple: establish first contact with the Astrian species and set up diplomatic relations. But Miller had been in space long enough to know that nothing was ever simple. "Status report," he ordered, his experienced eyes scanning the tactical displays surrounding his command chair. The bridge crew worked efficiently at their stations, each motion precise and practiced. "Their defense systems are active, Captain," reported the sensors officer. "They've raised shields and their weapon systems are charging." She paused, checking her readings again. "But their technology appears to be several generations behind ours." Miller nodded. He had expected this reaction. Humanity's reputation often preceded them, even in systems they hadn't visited before. Stories of Earth's military might had spread across the galaxy like wildfire after they had single-handedly stopped the Centauri invasion 5 years ago. "Open a channel," Miller commanded. "Let's show them we're not here to cause trouble." On the Astrian station, Admiral Gray paced nervously in the command center. The human ship's size alone was intimidating enough, but the energy readings from its hull suggested weapons powerful enough to tear their station apart in seconds. "Admiral," one of the junior officers called out, "they're hailing us." Gray took a deep breath, straightening his uniform. He had heard stories about humans, tales of their incredible technological advancement, their fierce protection of allies, and their terrifying efficiency in combat. But he had also heard they could be reasonable, even friendly, when treated with respect. "Put them through," he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Captain Miller's face. The human looked remarkably similar to Astrian's, except for his pale skin and smaller eyes. His expression was neutral but not threatening. "This is Captain James Miller of the Earth ship Thunderchild," Miller announced clearly. "We come in peace and request permission to establish diplomatic relations." Gray studied the human's face carefully. The translation systems were working perfectly, but it was the unspoken messages he was more interested in. The human captain's calm demeanor suggested confidence, but not aggression. "This is Admiral Gray of Proxima Station," he responded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your arrival was unexpected. Our records show no previous contact with your species in this sector." Miller smiled slightly. "That's correct, Admiral. We're expanding our diplomatic presence in this region of space. The Galactic Council suggested your system would be an excellent starting point for building new relationships." The mention of the Galactic Council made Gray's antenna twitch nervously. The Council's involvement meant this wasn't a random encounter. The humans were officially recognized as a major power. Before Gray could respond, the station's sensors lit up with new warnings. Energy fluctuations were detected from the colony below, the secret they had been desperately trying to hide. Gray saw Miller's eyes narrow slightly, and he knew the human ship had detected it too. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in person, Admiral," Miller suggested smoothly. "I believe we have much to discuss." Gray felt a cold sensation in his stomach. The humans had been in the system less than an hour, and already their presence was threatening to unravel everything. But refusing their request would only make things worse. "Of course, Captain," he agreed, trying to sound welcoming. "We'll prepare a reception team immediately." As the communication ended, Gray turned to his staff. "Contact the surface immediately. Tell them to shut everything down, and pray to the stars that these humans are as reasonable as the stories say." On the Thunderchild, Miller turned to his first officer. Interesting energy signature from that colony. Matches the profile of prohibited swarm technology. Should we report it to the Council? The officer asked. The docking procedure between the TES Thunderchild and Proxima Station took exactly 30 minutes. The Astrines watched in amazement as the massive human warship matched their station's rotation with perfect precision, despite its enormous size. Not a single correction burn was needed. Ambassador Tom Reed adjusted his uniform as he waited in the Thunderchild's airlock chamber with Captain Miller. A small team of security officers stood behind them, their presence subtle but alert. Reed had handled many first contact situations before, but something about this one felt different. Remember, Miller said quietly, they're more afraid of us than we are of them. Reed smiled. Isn't that usually said about snakes? Same principle applies in space, Miller replied as the airlock cycle began. The doors opened to reveal Admiral Gray and a group of Astrine officials. Their blue skin seemed to shimmer under the station's lights, and their large eyes darted nervously between the humans. Two Astrine security officers stood at attention, their hands noticeably far from their weapons. Welcome to Proxima Station, Gray said, performing the traditional Astrine greeting gesture. His antenna twitched slightly as he spoke, betraying his nervousness. Reed stepped forward, mirroring the gesture perfectly. The Astrines visibly relaxed at this show of cultural awareness. Thank you for your hospitality, Admiral. We look forward to productive discussions. As they walked through the station's corridors, Reed noticed how the local crew members stopped to stare at them. Some looked curious, others frightened, but all of them seemed to be paying special attention to the Thunderchild's crew uniforms. The meeting room they entered was large and circular, with a view of both the station's outer ring and the planet below. Reed noticed how the windows automatically darkened when they faced the colony that had shown strange energy readings earlier. Please be seated, Gray offered, gesturing to the chairs around a large table. We have prepared refreshments suitable for human consumption. As they settled in, Miller observed the subtle defensive measures built into the room. Shield generators in the walls, emergency force field projectors, and at least 3 hidden weapon ports. The Astrines were clearly cautious by nature. We appreciate your quick response to our arrival, Reed began diplomatically. Earth is very interested in establishing formal relations with the Proxima system. Gray's antenna twitched again. Yes, well, we are honored by your interest. Though I must admit, we were surprised by the military nature of your vessel. The Thunderchild is one of our diplomatic escorts, Miller explained smoothly. Space can be dangerous. We believe in being prepared. One of the Astrine officials, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. Prepared for what exactly? Our long-range sensors detected no threats in this sector. Reed noticed how Gray shot the official a warning look. Interesting. There was definitely internal tension among the Astrine leadership. Standard procedure, Miller replied calmly. Though we did detect some unusual energy signatures from your colony, our sensors suggested technology similar to routine power plant testing. Gray interrupted quickly. Too quickly. Nothing of concern. Reed and Miller exchanged a brief glance. The ambassador leaned forward slightly. Admiral, let me be direct. Earth has extensive experience with swarm technology. If your people are having problems with them, we might be able to help. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Astrine officials froze, their large eyes growing even wider. Gray's blue skin took on a slightly paler shade. Gray struggled to find words. That information is classified under Galactic Council regulations. The regulations also forbid the use of swarm technology, Miller pointed out. Yet here we are. A tense silence filled the room. Reed could almost see the wheels turning in Gray's mind as the Admiral weighed his options. Finally, Gray spoke in a much quieter voice. What we are about to tell you cannot leave this room, he said. The survival of our colony depends on it. Before he could continue, alarms began blaring throughout the station. An Astrine officer burst into the room. panic clear on his face. "Admiral, long-range sensors have detected multiple hyperspace signatures approaching the system. The energy patterns, they match the swarm." Miller stood up immediately. "How long until they arrive?" The officer looked at him in surprise, then at Gray, who nodded permission to answer. 4 hours at most," the officer replied. Miller turned to Gray, his expression serious. "Admiral, I suggest we continue this conversation on the Thunderchild. Whatever you've been hiding from the Council, it's about to become the least of your problems." The command center of the TES Thunderchild hummed with activity as Admiral Gray and his senior staff watched in amazement. The human crew worked with incredible efficiency, their movements precise and coordinated as they prepared for the coming threat. "Your ship's systems are impressive," Gray said, his antenna twitching as he watched the main tactical display. The resolution and detail were far beyond anything the Astrines had. Captain Miller stood at his command station, studying the approaching swarm signatures. "Now, Admiral, about those weapons you've been developing from swarm technology." Gray's shoulders slumped. There was no point hiding it anymore. 3 years ago, the swarm attacked one of our outer colonies. We managed to capture some of their damaged ships. Our scientists studied them, tried to understand their weaknesses. Security Chief Lisa Woods looked up from her console. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy patterns from the planet's surface. They match known swarm signatures, but different, modified." "We created a defense system," Gray admitted. "It emits energy frequencies that the swarm find painful, but it only works at short range, and using their own technology is forbidden by the Council." Miller's expression remained neutral. "So you hid it, kept it secret, even when we arrived." "We had no choice," Gray protested. "The Council would have punished our entire system. But the swarm, they keep coming back, each time with stronger shields. Our weapon is barely effective now." The tactical officer interrupted them. "Captain, incoming data from our probe network. The swarm fleet, it's bigger than anything in our records. At least 30 carrier ships." Miller turned to Gray. "How many ships can your people field?" 4 combat-ready vessels," Gray replied quietly. "Maybe 6 if we rush repairs on our reserve ships." The human captain nodded, making quick calculations. "Get them ready. We'll need everything we can get." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a priority message to Earth Command. Include all sensor data on the swarm fleet. It will take hours for reinforcements to arrive," Gray said, his voice heavy with worry. "We'll never survive that long." A small smile appeared on Miller's face. "Admiral, you haven't seen what one human warship can do yet." He pressed a button on his command chair. "All hands, this is the captain. Battle stations, this is not a drill." The Thunderchild's interior lights shifted to a deep red. Crew members moved with practiced speed to their combat positions. The ship's massive engines hummed as power was redirected to weapons and shields. "Your colony's defense system," Miller said to Gray. "Can it be modified? Adjusted to a different frequency?" One of the Astrine scientists spoke up. "Yes, but it would take time we don't have. And we don't know what frequency would work better." Lisa Woods stepped forward. "Captain, if I could access their research data, I might be able to help. Earth's encounters with the swarm gave us detailed information about their vulnerabilities." Miller nodded. "Make it happen." He turned back to Gray. "Admiral, I need you to trust us. Completely. No more secrets." Gray looked around the bridge at the calm, professional human crew preparing for battle. They showed no fear, no panic, despite facing overwhelming odds. Perhaps this was why humans had such a fearsome reputation. "You have it," Gray said firmly. "Whatever you need." Miller started issuing orders rapidly. "Move all civilian ships behind the planet. Position your combat vessels in a defensive screen around the colony. The Thunderchild will take point." "Take point?" Gray asked, confused by the human term. We'll be the first line of defense, Miller explained. Your ships should focus on protecting the colony. Let us handle the main swarm fleet. Gray's eyes widened. But their numbers. Numbers aren't everything, Admiral. Miller's voice carried absolute confidence. The swarm is about to learn why challenging a human warship is considered suicide in some parts of the galaxy. The tactical display showed the swarm ships getting closer. Their biomechanical vessels looked like massive insects, their hulls covered in natural armor and weapon growths. Time to contact, Miller asked. 40 minutes, Captain, the tactical officer reported. Miller nodded. Good. That gives us just enough time to prepare a proper welcome for our uninvited guests. He looked at Gray. Admiral, I suggest you contact your colony. Tell them to get that defense system ready. When this is over, we'll help you make it legal and more effective. For the first time since the alarm sounded, Gray felt a spark of hope. Perhaps the stories about humans weren't exaggerated after all. Maybe they were understated. Lisa Woods worked quickly at the science station on the Thunderchild, her fingers flying over the holographic controls as she analyzed the Astrian defense system data. The Astrian scientist next to her watched in amazement at the speed of her work. This is brilliant, she said, studying the detailed scans. Your people managed to reverse engineer swarm biotechnology and turn it against them. But look here. She pointed to a complex energy pattern. You're only using a fraction of its potential. On the main bridge, Captain Miller watched the tactical display as the swarm fleet drew closer. Their ships moved in perfect formation, like a cloud of deadly insects approaching their prey. The Thunderchild's advanced sensors revealed details the Astrians had never been able to see before. Their ships are linked, Miller noted. They share a collective consciousness, just like in our previous encounters. Admiral Gray stepped closer to the display. Yes, that's what makes them so dangerous. They think and act as one. Miller smiled slightly. It's also what makes them predictable. They can't adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Each new strategy has to be approved by the entire collective. The Thunderchild's engines hummed as the massive ship moved into position. Behind it, 4 Astrian vessels formed a protective screen around their colony. Their crews watched in confusion as the human warship began what looked like a strange dance in space. Captain, Gray asked, what are you doing? Creating a target they can't resist, Miller replied. The swarm operates on simple principles. They always attack what they perceive as the greatest threat first. He turned to his weapons officer. Status of the new frequency calculations. Chief Woods has transmitted the data. All weapons are being adjusted now. Lisa looked up from her station. Captain, I found something. The Astrians were close to a breakthrough without realizing it. Their defense system doesn't just hurt the swarm. It can disrupt their hive-mind connection. Gray's antenna straightened in surprise. What? But our tests showed only minor damage to their ships. Because you were trying to destroy their hulls, Lisa explained. But their real vulnerability is their communication network. Break that, and their perfect coordination becomes chaos. Miller nodded. How long to modify the colony's defense system? 20 minutes, Lisa replied. But we'll need to get much closer to their fleet for it to work. The tactical officer's voice cut through the conversation. Swarm fleet entering weapons range in 5 minutes. They're accelerating. They're eager, Miller commented. Good. That means they're not thinking defensively. He pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands, this is the captain. In 5 minutes, we're going to give our friends out there a demonstration of human ingenuity. Stand by for high-speed maneuvers. Gray watched as the human crew calmly prepared for battle. There was none of the nervous energy he was used to seeing before combat. These humans moved with the confident precision of experienced warriors. Your ship, he said slowly, you fought the swarm before. Miller nodded. 7 times. Won 7 times. But this fleet is bigger than any we faced before. He paused, then smiled. Should be interesting. The tactical display suddenly flashed red. The swarm fleet had launched their first wave of attack ships, thousands of smaller vessels breaking away from the carrier ships. "They're not waiting," the tactical officer reported. "Attack pattern suggests they're treating us as a primary threat." "Of course they are," Miller said. "We're broadcasting enough energy to look like 3 Astrian battleships." "Lisa, how's that defense system coming?" "Nearly there. The Astrian scientists are implementing the changes now." "But Captain," she hesitated, "even with the modifications, we'll need to be within 10,000 kilometers for maximum effect." Miller's expression didn't change. 10,000 kilometers, right in the middle of their fleet. He turned to Gray. "Admiral, I hope your nerve is steady. You're about to see why humans have a reputation for crazy battle tactics." The first wave of swarm ships was now clearly visible through the bridge viewport, their biomechanical forms glowing with deadly energy. Behind them, the massive carrier ships moved forward like dark clouds. "All hands," Miller called out, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Prepare for combat maneuvers. Let's show our guests why picking a fight with a human warship is a bad idea." The Thunderchild's engines roared to full power, its massive form moving with impossible grace as it prepared to meet the oncoming storm of enemies. The real battle was about to begin. The TES Thunderchild moved like a dancer through space, its massive hull somehow dodging the first wave of swarm attacks. Admiral Gray grabbed onto a support rail as the artificial gravity compensated for another impossible turn. He had never seen a ship this size move so gracefully. "Multiple hits on swarm attack craft," the weapons officer reported calmly. "Their shields are adapting, but not fast enough." The space around the human warship lit up with explosions as its point defense systems shredded incoming enemies. Each shot found its mark with deadly precision, creating a barrier of destruction that none of the smaller swarm ships could penetrate. "Show me the carrier ships," Miller ordered. The tactical display zoomed out, revealing the massive swarm vessels moving to surround them. Just as expected. "Lisa, status of the colony's defense system." "Ready, Captain," she replied from her station. "But we're still too far for maximum effect." Miller nodded and turned to his helm officer. "Take us in. Full power to forward shields." He looked at Gray. "Admiral, you might want to hold on to something. This next part gets rough." The Thunderchild's engines flared bright blue as the ship accelerated directly toward the heart of the swarm fleet. Thousands of enemy weapons fired at once, creating a web of deadly energy beams and plasma bolts. But the human ship's shields held. More than held, they seemed to grow stronger with each hit, adapting and learning from the attacks. The swarm weapons that had terrorized Astrian ships for years barely scratched the Thunderchild's defenses. "Their pattern is changing," the tactical officer reported. "The carrier ships are pulling back. They've never encountered shields they couldn't break before. They're confused," Miller explained to Gray. "The collective can't agree on how to handle us. Time to add to their confusion." He pressed his command console. "All batteries, fire Plan Alpha. Show them what Earth's finest can do." The Thunderchild's weapon ports opened all at once. Energy beams of different colors shot out in perfect sequence, each one targeting a specific weak point on the swarm ships. Where Astrian weapons had struggled to damage the biomechanical armor, the human weapons cut through like hot knives through butter. 8,000 kilometers to optimal range. Lisa announced, "The colony's defense system is ready to sync with our attack." Gray watched in awe as 3 swarm carriers exploded simultaneously, their synchronized shields useless against the randomized attack pattern of the human weapons. His antenna trembled as he realized what he was witnessing, the perfect blend of human unpredictability and technological superiority. 5,000 kilometers, the helm reported. "We're taking heavy fire from all directions." The bridge shook as multiple swarm weapons found their mark. But the Thunderchild's shields continued to hold, adapting and strengthening with each hit. The massive ship pushed forward, its weapons blazing in an endless dance of destruction. "Now," Lisa shouted, "colony defense system activating." A wave of invisible energy pulsed out from the planet's surface, perfectly timed with a burst from the Thunderchild's specialized emitters. The effect was immediate and devastating. The swarm ships suddenly lost their perfect coordination, their movements becoming jerky and uncontrolled. Direct hit on their neural network, Lisa reported excitedly. The hive mind connection is breaking down. They can't coordinate their attacks anymore. Miller leaned forward in his command chair. All weapons, free fire. Target their command nodes. Don't let them reestablish their link. The space around them erupted in chaos. Without their collective consciousness, the swarm ships began to collide with each other. Some fired blindly, hitting their own vessels. The perfect army had become a panicked mob. Gray stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 10 minutes, the human ship had achieved what the Astrine fleet had never managed in years of fighting. They had broken the swarm's spirit. Remaining carrier ships are attempting to retreat, the tactical officer reported. Their engines are powering up for hyperspace jumps. Let them go, Miller ordered. They'll carry the message back to their hive. This system is now under human protection. He turned to Gray, whose blue skin had paled from the intensity of the battle. Admiral, I believe this would be a good time to continue our diplomatic discussions, particularly about making your defense system legal and sharing it with other worlds that face the swarm threat. Gray could only nod, his eyes still fixed on the retreating enemy ships. The stories about human military prowess hadn't been exaggerated at all. If anything, they had understated just how terrifying humans could be in battle. The cleanup operation after the battle kept both human and Astrine crews busy for hours. Debris from destroyed swarm ships floated in complex patterns around the planet, while rescue teams picked up escape pods from the few swarm creatures that had chosen to abandon their hive mind rather than retreat. On the Thunderchild's observation deck, Captain Miller and Admiral Gray watched as Astrine ships used tractor beams to collect the larger pieces of swarm technology. Each piece would be valuable for research now that the Galactic Council would be officially involved. Your ship didn't even use its main weapon systems, Gray said, his voice still showing traces of disbelief. Those were just your standard combat weapons. Miller nodded. The Thunderchild is a diplomatic vessel, Admiral. If we had brought a dedicated warship, he left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Lisa Woods joined them, carrying a data tablet filled with preliminary analysis of the battle. The modified defense system worked better than expected. The swarm's neural network completely collapsed when hit with the combined frequencies. They'd never experienced anything like it. And now they never will again, Miller added. They adapt quickly. The next time they encounter this technology, they'll have some defense against it. Gray's antenna drooped slightly. Then our weapon will become useless. Not useless, Lisa corrected. Just less effective. That's why we need to keep developing it. Stay ahead of their adaptations. She showed them some readings on her tablet. Your scientists were on the right track, but they were limited by council restrictions. Working together openly, we can make something much better. The observation deck's door opened, and Ambassador Reed entered with several Astrine officials. Their expressions were much more relaxed now compared to their first meeting just hours ago. The council representatives will arrive in 2 days, Reed announced. They're very interested in our joint defense project proposal. Joint defense? Gray asked, his antenna perking up with interest. Miller smiled. Earth is proposing a formal military alliance with the Proxima system. We'll help upgrade your defenses, share our swarm combat data, and establish a permanent Earth fleet presence in your space. And in return, one of the Astrine officials asked cautiously, we get a forward base for our diplomatic and military operations in this sector, Reed explained, plus access to your scientists' research on swarm biotechnology. Together, we can develop better ways to protect all our worlds. Gray looked out at the stars, watching as another piece of swarm debris was captured by an Astrine ship. The Council won't object, even after we broke their laws. The Council, Reed said with a slight smile. Is very practical when it comes to dealing with the swarm threat, especially when Earth offers to take responsibility for a project. Our reputation helps in more ways than one. A junior officer approached them with a new report. Captain, long-range sensors show the retreating swarm ships have entered hyperspace. They're heading directly back to their territory. Good, Miller nodded. They'll spread the word. The Proxima system is no longer an easy target. Gray turned to face the human captain. When your ship first appeared in our system, we thought it was the beginning of the end for us. We were sure you'd report our illegal weapons research to the Council. Instead, Lisa added, it turned out to be the solution to your problems. A common theme when dealing with humans, Reed commented. We have a habit of turning dangerous situations into opportunities. The deck vibrated slightly as the Thunderchild's engines powered up, moving the ship into a new position to better coordinate the cleanup effort. Through the observation windows, they could see the Astrine colony below, its defense towers now operating openly, their energy signatures no longer hidden. The swarm will return eventually, Miller said. They always do. But next time, they'll find something very different waiting for them. Gray looked at the human captain with new understanding. Yes, they will. They'll find our peoples standing together. His antenna straightened with pride. Perhaps that's what truly terrifies our enemies, not just human military power, but your ability to turn former strangers into strong allies. Miller watched as another Astrine ship docked with the Thunderchild, beginning the transfer of technical data that would form the foundation of their new alliance. Fear is good for keeping enemies away, Admiral. But trust is what builds lasting peace. The stars continued their eternal dance outside, witnesses to yet another moment where humanity's arrival had changed the course of a civilization's future, not through conquest or intimidation, but through protection and cooperation. 2 weeks after the battle, the Proxima system looked very different. Construction ships worked steadily to build a joint human-Astrine space station, while defense platforms incorporating both species' technologies formed a protective network around the colony. The TES Thunderchild remained in orbit, its presence alone deterring any thoughts of hostile action. In the colony's main conference center, Captain Miller sat beside Admiral Gray as they watched the Galactic Council representatives examine the technical data from the battle. The council members, representing 12 different species, showed a range of reactions from amazement to concern. The evidence is clear, the lead council member announced, her crystalline form shimming as she spoke. The modified swarm technology, while previously forbidden, has proven remarkably effective when combined with human military systems. Not just effective, Lisa Woods added from her position near the technical display. It's revolutionary. Our joint research teams have already developed 3 new variations of the defense system. The council members whispered among themselves. Finally, the crystalline leader spoke again. The council hereby grants retroactive approval for the Proxima Defense Project. Furthermore, we authorize the immediate formation of a human Astrian Joint Defense Force. Admiral Gray's antenna quivered with relief and pride. His people's greatest fear had become their greatest achievement. He looked at Miller, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. Honored Council, Gray addressed the assembly. We also request permission to share this technology with other systems threatened by the swarm. Under human supervision, Miller added quickly. Earth will take full responsibility for the proper use and development of these defenses. The council chamber erupted in excited discussion. Other species representatives began raising their hands, already eager to join the new alliance. The crystalline leader had to sound a harmonic tone to restore order. This is unprecedented, she noted. Never before has a species so new to the council shown such decisive leadership. She paused, her crystal structure pulsing with thought. Yet your actions here have demonstrated both wisdom and restraint. The council approves. Outside the conference center's windows, the Thunderchild's massive form caught the light of the system's sun, its hull showing barely any signs of the fierce battle it had won. Work crews could be seen making modifications to its weapon systems, incorporating astrine technology to make it even more effective against future swarm attacks. Ambassador Reed stepped forward with a data crystal. We've prepared a preliminary schedule for technology sharing and training. Earth is ready to begin immediately. The council member received the crystal, examining it with her sensory facets. Remarkable. When your ship first arrived in this system, many feared it was a prelude to human expansion through military might. Her crystalline form sparkled with what seemed like amusement. Instead, you have shown us a new way forward. Protection through cooperation. Miller stood, his uniform pristine as he addressed the council. Earth learned long ago that true strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together. The swarm is a threat to all our peoples. We'll face them together, or we'll fall separately. Gray joined him, his blue skin glowing with pride. When the Thunderchild entered our system, we thought it was our darkest hour. We were wrong. He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. It was the beginning of a new dawn. Later, on the Thunderchild's bridge, Miller watched as the first group of astrine officers arrived for joint training. They moved nervously at first, but soon began talking excitedly with their human counterparts about the ship's systems. They learned quickly, Lisa noted, standing beside her captain. Their technical skills complement ours perfectly. Fear can be useful, Miller replied, remembering their first contact with the astrines. But trust builds something far more powerful. He turned to his crew. Set course for the next system on our diplomatic tour. Let's go make some more friends. The Thunderchild's engines hummed to life, its massive form turning gracefully in space. Below, the Proxima colony's new defense towers tracked its movement, not in fear as they had 2 weeks ago, but with respect and friendship. The human warship that had entered their system as a source of terror had become a symbol of hope. In the darkness between the stars, word spread quickly among the swarm and other hostile species. Challenging human space meant facing not just Earth's formidable military might, but the combined strength of an ever-growing alliance. The galaxy was changing, one system at a time, as humanity showed that the most powerful force in space wasn't weaponry or technology, but the bonds forged between different peoples united in a common cause.